All right, how's everybody doing tonight? So I kind of wrestled with the idea of the stream. Welcome to my first dedicated post-mortem stream of this college football season. I wrestled with what day to do it on. I'm not going to do it on Sunday because that's NFL day, and I know a lot of you guys are watching NFL, and I don't want to step on the NFL's toes, so to speak. So I'm not going to do it on Sunday, but I feel like, Monday, you still got Monday Night Football going on, but I feel like doing it on Tuesday will be a little bit too late. I mean, by Tuesday, people are ready to move on to the next week. They don't want to look back at the previous week. So I guess Monday night it is, unless, some of you might want me to do it on another night. I'm open to suggestions. But anyway, welcome to Week 2 post-mortem. It was an interesting week for sure. Good evening, Rashim. How's everybody doing tonight? I don't expect everybody to watch this live. I'm recording this video for people to watch later as well, but if you want to join me live, that is fine. So what I'm going to talk about, the first thing I'm going to do, the first part of this video is just going to be me kind of going off the cuff, and then we're going to go into the stats and the models and everything like that. I'll put my green screen up and we can look at that. So the one thing that stood out to me this week in college football is just how the same programs seem to have the same results. Texas, USC, Florida State. It's like these programs, they have a lot of potential, a lot of hype, and they're just stuck in the mud. They just can't find consistency. And those places have just been a revolving door of coaches, and the problem is they're missing consistency, and they just undershoot expectations. And I was saying this on the stream on Saturday. The problem with those schools is that it's just you need someone to manage the egos. And if you can't get someone to manage the egos and the entitlement and all that, you're not going to succeed. And it takes a certain type of coach to succeed at a place like Texas or USC. I've said on the stream, you need a mob boss type. You need an iron-fisted ruler. And the problem is there's only one iron-fisted ruler head coach really left in college football, and that's Nick Saban. You're not going to get it done with an X's and O's coach, because the problem with X's and O's coaches is they can only succeed at smaller schools, because at the smaller schools, you're not going to get the egos, you're not going to get the personalities to come play for you. You need a very strong iron-fisted personality to keep those egos in check, and the X's and O's guys aren't that. That's why coaches like your Matt Campbells, your guys who are really good at out-scheming everybody, coaching everybody, they're not going to succeed at a place like Texas or USC because they just don't have they're not going to be respected. Let's put it that way. And so, the only other mob bosses out there are currently out of the profession or in the NFL. You have Urban Meyer. He was a mob boss, and Bob Stoops was a mob boss as well. And so I feel like USC wasn't going to fire someone week 2. By the way, I don't like firing coaches in the middle of the season unless I just don't like it. I think it's bad taste. Just, if you're going to fire him, why'd if you're going to fire him after one loss, why'd you even let him coach to begin with? You should have made the move in the offseason. But anyway, I don't think USC makes this move unless they already have a guy who's ready to come in. He's obviously not going to come in now. He's going to come in at the end of the season. But they're not going to fire somebody this quickly unless they already have a guy, because they don't want the interim guy to come in and basically save his job. And you fire Clay Helton now because you don't want him to save his job. You're ready to move on, and you don't want to give him a chance to turn it around. You're just ready to move on. So that's why you fire him now. But, all the names throwing out there, I just have I have a gut feeling that USC is going to hire a NFL coach, whether it be a coordinator or a head coach. I just feel like they're going to go the NFL route, and they're never going to learn, because NFL and college football are two completely different types of games, and there's a reason why it's hard for NFL coaches to step down a level and succeed in college. It's a different game, and the main difference is the way teams prepare. NFL coaches prepare a lot differently than college coaches, and mainly the main difference in preparation is NFL coaches, not a lot of contact in practice, and they don't let the backups get a lot of reps. And so those are the two main differences between an NFL practice and a college practice. And the problem is those NFL coaches come down and try to run their practices in the same way. Not a lot of contact, and the ones get a majority of the reps, and that's the issue. And so anyway, but I feel like that's the route USC is going to go. They're going to get some NFL retread or NFL coordinator or something like that, and they're not going to be none the wiser. They need a coach that can come in and rule with an iron fist. I know they're talking about Luke Fickell, but I just don't see him leaving for California. He just doesn't have the personality for Southern California, and I don't think he wants to. I think he wants to stay in Big Ten country. I think the only jobs Luke Fickell would leave for would be Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Those are the only ones I could see him bolting for. And it's kind of the same with Matt Campbell. He's just a Midwest guy. I just don't see him leaving for a region outside his comfort zone. And I know people are talking about Lane Kiffin, but yeah, I mean, I just don't think Lane Kiffin's going to want to go through that again. I feel like the way he was let go from USC, disrespectful. I just don't see it happening. But yeah, I just feel like USC, unless they hire a guy, I don't even know if Urban Meyer could do it. I mean, he's just so all over the place mentally. I mean, how much sanity does that guy have left? And so Bob Stoops, I don't think he's realistic. I think he likes being retired or semi-retired. I know he coached in the XFL, but that's a lot different than the day-to-day grind of college coaching. I don't think the average person realizes how much time a college coach has to put in. And that's why when I was asked to be a graduate assistant at TCU, I said no, because talk about having no life. I mean, you have to be willing to put in that kind of grind, and I just don't think I would have been willing to do the recruiting part of it. But anyway, to just talk about the rest of week 2, the thing is that we were talking about this morning with people I work with is it's Alabama, Georgia, and everybody else. I mean, it feels like there's no other contenders besides Alabama and Georgia. They seem like they're on a stratosphere of their own, and everybody else is just fighting to be the next best after them. And I agree, those are the 2 best teams. And I don't think that's up for debate. The drop-off from Georgia, number 2, to number 3 is massive. I mean, who is your number 3? I mean, seriously, who's your number 3 right now? No, yeah, I mean, even, and when you look at other playoff teams, I mean, who's going to represent the playoff outside of the SEC? I mean, everybody in the Big 12 has looked vulnerable at some point. The ACC's top playoff threat already lost, and I just don't think they have enough quality wins left on their schedule to be able to overcome that. The Big 10, same thing. Is there anybody who's going to go undefeated in there? I mean, Wisconsin already lost. I don't see Penn State running the table, and Ohio State has a loss. And then you have the Pac-12. I mean, can Oregon run the table? The Pac-12, I mean, on paper they should, but that never is how it works out. So that's the thing. I mean, unfortunately, guys, I would get used to having 2 teams in the SEC. And people are going to talk about teams like Cincinnati, and I don't know. It depends on how Notre Dame finishes out. It depends on how Notre Dame and Indiana go. First of all, Cincinnati has to win those 2 games, and then we can talk about Cincinnati. But Notre Dame doesn't look as good as people thought they were going to be, neither does Indiana. So those 2 wins might not do anything for Cincinnati. But honestly, if there's a year that a team like Cincinnati gets in, this is it. So we'll look at the number. Yeah, so Monday Night Football. I know a lot of you guys are NFL guys too, and I don't want to step on Monday Night Football's toes, but I just didn't know a better night of the week to do these post-mortems. So it's going to be week 3. The slate doesn't look that as exciting as weeks 1 and 2 did, but that's usually how it is every year. Usually either week 3 or week 4, not both, but one of those 2 weeks every year tend to kind of take a step back in terms of matchup quality. And that year, week 3 is it. Some years, week 3 is really good, but not this year. Yeah, I agree, Scott K. Arkansas, here's the deal. I don't think Texas was ever that good. They're overrated every year, and they are overrated again this year. I don't think they were ever that good. And Arkansas, I think they played out of their minds, but I don't think they're that good either. I don't. I think that they beat a bad Texas team. It's kind of like, how do we put it? What was the team from week 1? Or, they're getting too much hype for beating a Texas team that's not that good. Let's put it that way. Yep. Auburn, Penn State, I think is the only, that and Alabama, Florida are the only really top tier matchups that we're going to see on Saturday. I mean, in terms of matchup quality. Outside of that, it's just, a lot of, there's some conference games that are lopsided. I mean, Michigan State and Miami would be interesting, but Miami just I don't know why they're still ranked. I don't. Appalachian State had them. Yeah, I still hate Texas. Appalachian State had them. The rest bailed them out. There's matchups that could be interesting, like Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Indiana. Just going down the list right now. Even like Utah and San Diego State could be interesting, because San Diego State, when you see my ratings, you'll see that San Diego State shot up very high, shot like a rocket strapped to them. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain it when I switch to the green screen. But, I think week 3, definitely the weakest lineup of the year, but when you're betting on these games and have a model, all the games are fun. That's how I see it. Yeah. Arkansas did beat Rice in week 1, but it wasn't very impressive. I mean, Texas and Rice play each other on Saturday, and I mean, we'll see. We'll see. But, all right, I'm about to put the green screen up, but those are just my initial thoughts on week 2. And I don't know why my camera does this, but like the frame rate drops, and it's weird. But yeah, let me try to disable it. But it's weird. Like I don't want you guys to see a dropped frame rate camera, but it does that, and then like I'll deactivate it and reactivate it again, and the frame rate will be fine or not. It's so weird. You know what? Whatever. I'm about to go to the green screen anyway. Oops. All right. So I will take a quick break to put my green screen up, and I'll be right back. Whoops. All right, here we go. Again, I apologize for the camera frame rate. I don't know why that happens, but it probably, as long as you can see everything else. Did I see the tweet? No, I haven't checked any of my tweet replies yet, actually. I've just been spamming those. Michigan State offensive efficiency. Can you post what you posted in the chat, Zodwick, so I can get to you? So overall, once again, it was a losing week for all the models. Some of the keys were there, but against the spread, I haven't been able to solve that yet. But when you look at the keys, there's some promise. But overall, the neural network is the only model that's up without keys on the year. But the least squares is doing the best when you factor in the keys. So when we look at the key matrix, which is a new feature added to my site, then we can take a bigger look at that. But the neural network has definitely been the best model so far. It's been the best against the spread. It's been the best on totals, and it's been the second best on money line. So I mean, which is weird because the models that tested the best when I was setting them up, feature selection, feature tuning, and back testing and all that was least squares and random forest. Those are the two best on that. And support vector machine did pretty well too. So let's look at the key matrix. This is a new feature added to my site, and this shows the key matrix. So I run through all the possible key combinations. There's like 127 different combinations, and it cycles through all the keys to find like the optimal keys for the combination for each combination. And spread has been tough. Even when you try to factor in keys, like you're only getting about 6 plays, which means the keys are very tight, and that makes it very hard to find any plays. But that's just how it's been. My models have not been successful against the spread, and we'll look at those more in detail later. Michigan State offense officially seems wrong in my latest rankings, way negative by ranked middle. I'll check it out for you, Zodwick. But this is a key metric for spread, so this means I'll probably select one of these this week, and there's not going to be a lot of spread plays. For totals, it's a little bit different. Totals a lot better. The best performing keys are the least square support vector neural network. If the value edges are greater than these numbers, it's 3421 for plus 10.9 units. So totals have been the lone bright spot this year. And money lines, it's different. So k-nearest neighbors, random forest, and neural network are the top 3 performing metrics here. K-nearest neighbors, random forest, and then random forest neural network are tied. They both are plus 15.01 units. And you're like, okay, what about k-nearest neighbors, random forest, and neural network? Well, not exactly. You have to scroll all the way down. Yeah. That combination, surprisingly, you think that if those are the top 3, then that combination would be good. It's actually only plus 6.58 units right here. So I'm probably going to ride with random forest neural network for week 3, that line right there. So as far as my players are concerned, if you watched my stream, you saw I'm actually glad I only lost 9.84 units. I did pretty good on the night games because I was staring down the barrel of losing about 15 units on Saturday night until like the BYU game and San Diego State game came through. So the night games really helped me out. UNLV, it was another one. But again, spread plays are the main culprit. Totals and money lines, not so bad. Only -3 and -3.4 on the season, but spreads. But I'm in a hole. I'm -17.5 units on the year. I don't think I've ever been down that much during my recent 4-year run where I've profited every year. So this is definitely the biggest hole I'm going to have to climb out of. But I really hope that this key matrix will help things. But when you look down the line, I mean, Army and Western Kentucky, we watched that on the live stream, and we saw that coming from a mile away. Army had that in the bag, and then they just let Western Kentucky backdoor. UConn never really had it. Georgia Southern never had it. Buffalo never had it. Ball State had a chance, but they blew it. Florida International was tough. They lost in overtime as a pick'em. North Texas was another one. SMU got a late touchdown to cover. Eastern Michigan, same thing. Wisconsin had a late touchdown to cover. Troy was never in it. New Mexico never really threatened to cover. Georgia State, for the first half, looked like they were on their way, but didn't. Washington was never really in it. Totals-wise, the over on UNLV, Arizona State. UNLV had a chance to make this game go over at the end, and they went 4 and out. South Alabama, Bowling Green never had a chance, neither than Washington, Michigan. Vanderbilt, Colorado State was tough because it looked like the game was heading to overtime, but Colorado's defense collapsed and allowed Vanderbilt to win with a field goal. Rutgers and Syracuse is low scoring. Kentucky and Missouri was way over. Arkansas State and Memphis was way over. I think the combined total on that was like 105. And then money lines. I did hit on Oregon and BYU, but I just didn't hit enough on the rest to overcome the money lines. So there were some tough ones in here. Northern Illinois gave up a very late touchdown to lose. Toledo is the toughest one of the day. The refs really helped out Notre Dame there. But outside of that, there weren't really any other bad ones on here. Yeah, Army, we saw it coming from a mile away because we were like, they're going to let Western Kentucky march downfield and score because there's no, we saw it coming. It wasn't surprising at all. But when we look at the power ratings for this week, Clemson has moved back up to number 2, but again, you got to remember that preseason ratings still influence heavily here. So the weights I'm using is 7 games. So that means if a team's played 1 game like Alabama, it's 83% preseason ratings, 17% actual this year ratings. So it phases out. And once a team hits 7 games, and their preseason rating influence is gone. And so that's the thing. And here's another problem, is that the data I get is from ESPN, and it's free, but the problem is they miss some games. And that's an issue with the team. I think Michigan State might be one of those teams that are affected. Where are they at? Michigan State. Because that's what someone already brought up, so I want to look at them. Here they are, number 83. Okay, so they're not an effective team. But there are some games missing in week 1. Arkansas was one of them. Arkansas and Rice was a game where I didn't get any stats from my source. They were missing 8 games. San Diego State was another one. So San Diego State shot up to number 16, right? Because they had a pretty good win against an Arizona team that sucks. Let's be real. They're number 98 in my model. But we were missing the New Mexico State game data. Look, if you click on the box, nothing shows up because my data supplier didn't show it. So it does not factor in their horrible win over New Mexico State in their rating, which is why all they have is their Arizona game influencing their rating. So that's the problem. So San Diego State will drop as they get more games in, and maybe the New Mexico State game can come in. But you talked about Michigan State. So I have them at number 83 in my model. Their offensive drive efficiency, yeah, that's low. Minus 2.5. That might be a SQL issue. I'm glad you pointed that out, though, because sometimes SQL screws with because their drive efficiency against Northwestern was 1.277, which means it should be higher. You know what? I think I know why this is happening, where I use Zodwick. It's an error. I guarantee you if I open up my ratings file, it's going to be an error. Watch. And I'll show you what I mean by error, but I guarantee this is it because this happens all the time. I need to turn off Sipin. Michigan State. Yep, called it. See, look. See, minus 2. Let me zoom in so you can see it. Minus 2.51 E minus 04. That's the problem. I told you, I called it. I don't know why that happens, but SQL doesn't process it right. So SQL acts like that's a float. So I need to change the SQL to fix that. I wonder if that's affecting their overall rating. You know what? I don't think it is. It might. Minus 2.54. I wonder if that's affecting their overall rating. That's a tough one. I don't know. But yeah, that's the thing. If teams are missing data, then we run into. But we got Alabama 1, Clemson 2. So Georgia's only at 7. But I believe once, like I said, their preseason estimates are weighing them down. Once they get more games in, I mean, look at this. UAB and Clemson, 2 impressive wins, and they're going to have a couple body bag opponents coming up. So they're gonna rise. They're still not getting the full credit of their defense yet because their preseason number is still weighing them down. I need to play a video or something on my laptop so it doesn't turn off. But they're number 2. And then we got Wisconsin at 4. People are like, but they lost. But you got to remember, my model really likes teams with good defenses, and they still have the number 2 defense. And they also like very efficient teams. Since they play so slow, that means they're going to be efficient. It's just how it is. It's the same in basketball as well. Slower-paced teams seem to be a little bit better in my basketball ratings as well. Oklahoma 5, despite the Tulane game. Ohio's still at 6, and then Oregon's at 13. So you got to remember preseason ratings. If you go to other ratings, like BCF Toys is one, I guarantee you it's going to be the same thing because they still have preseason ratings and with a huge influence. But Arkansas moved up to 27. I think they were number 50 last week. So there are teams that can move up with good performances, but if you're already at the top, it's probably going to be hard to fall. So this is another guy so pretty much this guy's ratings are pretty much if you just use my drive efficiency stats, ODE and DDE, in the field position stats. I think that's all he uses in his. But even through week 2, he still has Clemson at 3, Ohio State at 4, Oregon at 13. So his are pretty similar to mine, although Texas A&M dropped on his, and they're still at 3 on mine. But we need to phase out the preseason ratings. Usually he'll say how much influence preseason ratings get, but he took that out. Last week it was at 83%. But with that being said, Iowa State, I'm surprised they didn't drop more, but their performance wasn't that bad. A lot of green on here. You got to remember, it's all relative to the strength of their opponent. They played a good team in Iowa, so that's why there's still a lot of green on here. If they played a bad team, it wouldn't be so green. So when we look at the teams of the week, week 2 game score, Georgia against UAB was the best performance of the week. Arkansas over Texas was number 2. Virginia over Illinois 3. Michigan over Washington 4. And Penn State over Ball State was 5. And then San Diego State over Arizona, like we already talked about, they are number 6. So the best performance in a loss was Colorado against Texas A&M. They actually had a higher game score than Texas A&M did. So here's Texas A&M down here. So that's kind of how the cookie crumbles with that. The best offensive performance of the week, Purdue against UConn. Even when you factor in, their raw drive efficiency against UConn was almost 4. So that's just ridiculous. That's almost, it looks like the next highest raw efficiency was 2.371, Oregon State against Hawaii. So they're 1.6 points per drive higher than the next highest team on the raw, but even when you subtract UConn's horrendous defensive drive efficiency, they're still at 2.05. I mean, still good for number 1. Coastal Carolina 2, Virginia 3, Memphis over Arkansas State 4, Western Kentucky against Army 5, TCU against California 6. And the best defensive performances of the week, Georgia, UAB, and Arkansas and Texas, Colorado against Texas A&M, Penn State against Ball State, and then Iowa against our friends at Iowa State. Those are your best defensive performances. If you want to see other stats, go ahead and check this out. Pretty interesting. And then there's one more thing I added that I want to show you guys. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it yet, but I added some graphs. So I want to look at the Army-Western Kentucky game to help illustrate this. So, whoops, not Minnesota. So this graph, you can pick 3 metrics: win percentage, cover percentage, or over percentage. So it gives you real-time win percentage in the form of a graph for the play-by-play data that you can also look at play-by-play down here. But the graph is interesting because you can see it plotted out and see how things change. So like when Western Kentucky scored that garbage time touchdown there at the end to pull within 3 and cover, their win percentage actually went up to 10.7%, but the onside kick was recovered and it went back down to 0. But let's look at the cover percent. So look at this. Western Kentucky's chance of covering was as low as 0.5% right here. They are down 35-14, right? They're down 35-14. I was giving them an 0.5% chance to cover, right? But we called it. We said that we were going to get backdoored, and we were. And then all of a sudden, but even, let's see. But then Army kicks a field goal. And so their cover percentage went to 9.5%. And then Army just didn't play defense, let them march downfield. But even before the touchdown, they were only at 16.1%, but then the touchdown brought it up to 100%. And that was that. So you can look at things like that. Also, you can see how the total went and the percentage chance it went over. So this game did go over. But there was a point in the game where the total percentage was still below 50%. Although there are some things wrong with this play-by-play data I use to calculate these, and let me go over that because it's not perfect. Like I said, the play-by-play data I get is free, but because it's free, that means it's flawed in some places. So there's some games that is illustrated. Let me see if I can pick one out that I already looked at and saw that the data was flawed. This might be one. Yeah, you see these like wild swings in here? See how this data, like the wild swings? I'm trying to explain. I don't know if this is the best example to use for the wild swings, though, but that is definitely a flawed. So the play-by-play data I get is not perfect. It's good, but not great. But again, it's free, and it's the only data source I have. So if that data source goes away, I have nothing. But I'm trying to find a good game to where this effect is illustrated. Oh, the Houston and Rice game was one. I can use that as an illustration. Houston and Rice. So see how there's like a random dip right here? It's because the play-by-play data I get has just some nuances. And I spent like all weekend on Labor Day weekend trying to correct all those nuances in the play-by-play data. But if you've seen the movie Vegas Vacation where Clark goes to the Hoover Dam and he causes a leak and he tries to plug all the leaks, but every time he plugs one leak, one more leak happens. That's the deal with this play-by-play data I use to calculate these charts and everything. For every like correction that fixes something like this you make, something else pops up. And so I just figured, you know what? There's no point in trying to do this. It's a self-defeating prophecy because the data is just too flawed and you can't like correct every single flaw. There's just not enough hours in the day. So I tried to collect as many main flaws as possible, but there's going to be some flaws like this that are in the data. And that's why I originally planned on like creating a list of like the biggest plays of the week in terms of like the biggest jumps in win percentage or the biggest jumps in cover percentage, biggest jumps in total percentage. Like, but then it would be populated by jumps like this, right? Because of the flaw. And one of the main flaws that is incorrectable is the time. You can see, look, the time doesn't change. The time is the same throughout the whole drive. And since these models that calculate percent chance of going over, percent chance of covering, and all that are based, time is one of the main input variables into that model. And if the clock's not changing, it's going to cause problems like this right here. And so there's nothing I can do about that. There's no way I can possibly correct that. The only way I think I could correct it is like make a gradual, like find out what the time was at the end of the drive and find out what the time was at the beginning of the drive, and maybe do like a gradual step down. But like I said, it's just for every time I do a correction like that, something new pops up and I'm like, you know what, screw it. It is what it is. But that means I'm not going to be able to make a list of like the top plays of the week in terms of win percentage gained or the top plays of the week in terms of cover percentage gained. I could do it. I just have to self-curate it and get out all the false positives. But for now, I'm not going to do that. It's just a self-defeating prophecy. But there were some interesting beats this week. Eastern Michigan was Wisconsin. So I had Eastern Michigan spread, and so Eastern Michigan to cover was at 89.6% here towards the end, but then Wisconsin scored their touchdown, and their percent chance to cover it went down. No, it's not a formatting issue. It's just the data, because the source of my data is ESPN's API, and you go to their site and you see the same problems on the site, so there's nothing you can do about it. If you want play-by-play data that's not flawed, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. So you just have to take what you get and make the most of it. And so you can still get pretty meaningful graphs out of it, though. I mean, Eastern Michigan never had a chance to win, but their highest win percentage was 8.1% at some point. But yeah, I did have NFL on the TV yesterday. I wasn't really actually watching it, but I did have it on the TV just to see what was going on. It's not that I don't pay attention to NFL. I just don't it's just not as interesting to me as college. So what were some other interesting games this past week in terms of so Appalachian State, what did their win percentage get up to? We were following that as it happened. So 69% was as high as they got right here when they were at 14-12 in the second half. We always knew they were going to cover. I mean, that was never in doubt. You can see right here. The game didn't go over, though. See, this is an example of play-by-play data that's all good. There's no problems with this play-by-play data. So most of the games are fine, right? Most of the games of play-by-play data I get is fine, but not all of them. But Appalachian State, they're at 48.9% on their last drive, but then that fourth down pass that we all remember because he threw it to the guy who didn't even make it to the first down marker. Yes, see, it's $3,500 a month. That's about how much you're gonna have to pay for data that's not flawed. But overall, I think week 2 is successful. If we go back to the models again for week 3, the picks video is gonna be on Wednesday. I'll select my keys right for I might be a little, I'm probably not going to select any of these keys because they're too tight. I need to give my model a chance to turn it around, but I'll probably pick the neural network as a base key, and maybe the random forest as well, because those are the two best so far against the spread. So neural network and random forest, I'll probably pick those as ATS keys. For total keys, I'll definitely use this top one, least squares, support vector machine neural network. Those are the top performing metrics. And for moneyline keys, I'm going to pick random forest neural network. And those are going to be my keys on Wednesday when I do my picks. I might, I usually run my picks on Tuesday, so I'll upload them to the website. But if you want to hear actual analysis and details about them, watch my video on Wednesday. But the way so looking ahead to week 3 games, remember, these predictions on the team pages are the least squares predictions, so they don't use other models, just so I can get them in fast when I'm generating the predictions. But I have Penn State with about a 64.6 win percent chance over Auburn, average margin of 5. That sounds about right. I think Penn State is the better team. I'm not believing the Auburn hype. I mean, Auburn has played 2 horrible teams so far. And I was impressed by how Penn State looked against Ball State. Maybe even more impressed than how I was against Wisconsin. The other big game is Alabama-Florida. I said on Saturday, someone asked me to predict a spread, and I said 14.5, and I have it at 16.2 now, but I want to say the line is 14.5, so I was right on that. At least it opened at 14.5. So I just don't think Florida is the 10 team in the country. I don't think they're that good. They haven't really looked that impressive in their first 2 games. I mean, they just won because they were simply better, but I think Alabama will kind of bring them back to reality a little bit if they weren't already there, but the schedule does play out nice for Florida. Kentucky's going to be tough. LSU looks like they're not that great of a team. And the road games at South Carolina and Missouri at the end of the year should be wins in Florida State. So, I mean, honestly, I see maybe 3 losses on the schedule for Florida. So even if they take a step back, they're still going to win 9. And then some other interesting games this week. Virginia Tech at West Virginia. I have them winning by about 5.7. By about 66% win probability. That's a game to look at. And so let's look at Cincinnati. So I do have them going undefeated, but the Notre Dame margin is only 0.3, and the win percentage is 50.9%. Indiana's 65.2 and 5.7. Everybody else, they're Tulane and UCF are the only ones under 90%. Here's the problem, though. Fortunately for Cincinnati, they don't have the Murray State game in this model, and fortunately for Cincinnati, I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to their game against Murray State on Saturday because the Oregon-Ohio State game was going on at the same time. But they did not look great against Murray State. Let's just be real. That was too close. What was the? Let me find the box score because I remember it was 7-0 or 7-7 at halftime. I mean, this is a team that they are favored by 40 against. And I understand overlooking them, especially with their two biggest games of the year coming up next. You might want to not want to show much. But yeah, this is a tie game at halftime. Cincinnati didn't really pull away until the fourth quarter. And only 391 yards of offense. I'm guessing they just ran a very vanilla, bland offense to not show much for Indiana and Notre Dame. That's my guess. They did win 42-7, but that was the game was a lot closer than the final score. Fortunately, a lot of people probably weren't paying attention. And I think fortunately for Cincinnati, it's not going to matter. If they run the table, they will be in the playoff consideration, and especially with contenders in other leagues already having lost. Iowa State, I mean, I still have them going 10-2, but I think that's too optimistic. They're lucky that the Northern Iowa game is not a part of this model. Otherwise, they would be dropping. They would. They have a layup against UNLV, and then Baylor's going to be an interesting game because Baylor is number 39 in my model, but the thing is, Baylor's a good defense, and Iowa State's offense is just struggling despite the talent they returned, right? And so Baylor's going to tell us a lot about Iowa State in a couple weeks. Texas. So the loss to Arkansas, I mean, I still have them going 9-3. Rice will help them right the ship. And then Texas Tech, I mean, they should beat them. But the road game at TCU, not being a homer here, but that's been the game that Texas has not been able to win over the past decade. TCU beats them almost every year. And honestly, that game is, Arkansas is a non-conference game. Even though it's a tough loss, it didn't affect the Big 12 standings. But the TCU game, I have them winning it right now. But that's the game they haven't been able to win, and that will derail their season, especially because it comes right before the Red River rivalry game. They don't want to go into that with a loss. Okay, any other interesting cases? Like Washington, I mean, they're still at 21, but again, they're lucky the Montana game's not factored in. Iowa's only number 24. That's interesting. I mean, I have them going 7-2. They have a tough road game at Wisconsin. I also have them losing at home to Penn State, but that's a toss-up. But let's be real. This schedule outside of the road game at Wisconsin is very favorable. I could see Iowa going undefeated like they did back in 2015. I really could. Don't count them out. Their defense is really good. I just feel like their offense eventually is going to let them down at some point. And maybe not even against Wisconsin. I could see them slipping against a team like Nebraska or Minnesota. I'm not buying the Maryland hype, though. I'm not. I still have them going 5-7. So, yeah, I mean, they beat West Virginia. That was nice, but that's a tough schedule. That is a tough schedule. Oh, man, that's a tough schedule. So Maryland, not because they're bad, but because they just have a tough schedule. That's a tough one. All right, USC. They dropped all the way to 57 in my model, and now I have them going 3-9. I don't know if it's going to be that bad, but you can't lose to the number 86 team at home by 14 in a game that wasn't as close as the final score and expect not to drop. That was a big drop because I want to say they were in the 20s last week in my model, maybe even the teens. So dropping all the way to 57 means, yes, preseason ratings are still a big factor for them, but I mean, that was a bad loss. 3-9 might be too pessimistic on them, but I mean, if you look at the schedule, Washington State they should beat Oregon State, and then the Colorado will kind of be the make or break game for their interim coach. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I did see the Bengals game. That fumble by Minnesota really ruined them. Minnesota lost that game more than Cincinnati won it. All right. Any other interesting cases? So I do have Coastal Carolina going 11-0. I have them win, but no, I have them losing right here. So if you go by expected win percentage, it's all over 50%, which is what I use for the front page. But here I have them going 10-1 with the loss to App State. There's a team I want to look at Nevada. So I have them losing to K-State and Boise State and San Diego State. Yeah, that's the problem with Nevada is that their two hardest conference games are on the road. The schedule just didn't play out for them, unfortunately. All right, well, those are some interesting cases of teams this week. Apart from that, though, excited for week 3, excited to get things going. I'll have my picks video up on Wednesday night, as usual, but the picks might go live on my website before that. I might run it tomorrow. But, I still want to give people a reason to tune into the video and not just go to my website, so maybe I'll do it Wednesday before the stream instead of tomorrow. I might run it myself and just not upload it to the website just so I can see what things are looking like for the week. But I think, with the key matrix in place, I think the keys are going to turn around my own play results like they usually do. Like usually week 3 every year is when the keys really start to hit and start showing their value. But the first 2 weeks almost always are hard for me every year. The past 2 years being an exception where week 2 where it was good. But yeah, usually weeks 1 and 2 are losing weeks for me. And I feel like this year was especially difficult in terms of preseason ratings. They were very hard to do this year because 2020, you usually use the previous year to help really feed your preseason estimates, and almost the COVID year ratings are almost worthless. Let's be real. You had teams that were too good and teams that were too underrated because of the self-contained schedules that made it very difficult. So the approach I used was like a 2-tiered approach. I basically kept around the preseason estimates for 2020 ratings the entire season. I did not phase them out. So even if you played the full 12 or 13 game schedule in 2020, you still had a lot of preseason estimates factored into your end of year rating because that was the only way I could connect the teams. Because otherwise, the fact that teams didn't really play any non-conference games, you couldn't really connect the teams. So the self-contained schedules really either inflated or deflated teams too much. And that's how I did it. I mean, that's how other ratings did it, like S&P did it as well. I mean, there was no perfect way to go about preseason ratings this year. So you had to do the best of what you had. And I've heard that other computer models like S&P are having a hard time as well making predictions. And I like I said, I blame 2020. And that's why I'm phasing out the preseason ratings a lot quicker this year than I have in the past. Usually I phase them out after 10 games. They stay in almost the whole season for a team, but this year I'm phasing them out after 7. I might even drop that to 6, but we'll see. What matchups am I looking forward to the most this weekend? That's a good question. Let's look at this. Let's look at the schedule because I don't want to give the obvious answers like Florida and Alabama because that matchup honestly doesn't appeal to me that much because I know Alabama's going to win easily. Penn State and Auburn is appealing just because I think Auburn's not that great. I think they're just being inflated by their wins over body bag teams. But just looking at the schedule, UCF and Louisville on Friday night, it's not interesting because I think UCF is the better team and Louisville is not that good. But, UCF has to win that game for their own credibility. And honestly, Cincinnati needs UCF to win that game. And then, I'm just going down the schedule. Like Arizona State and BYU is interesting because I don't think BYU is a top 25 team. Where do I have them in my model? I have them at 38. Yeah, I'm not a believer in BYU. I'm not. I know they beat Utah, but I'm not a believer in Utah either, who dropped to 36 in my model. But Arizona State, are they that great? They looked okay against UNLV. I mean, they pulled away late. Let's look at the. This was a close game for a while. Arizona State really ran it up at the end. Look, it was only a 4-point game in the third quarter. So UNLV's cover percentage is high the entire time. And Arizona State just scored a bunch at the end, but Arizona State hasn't looked that great in their 2 games so far. But I think, but my model's so high on Arizona State, I have them at 9, mainly because they returned almost everybody, and the preseason metrics loved them. I agree Coastal Carolina is overhyped as well. I mean, I have them at what? 31? They're not a top 25 team either, but who's going to beat them outside of Appalachian State? Their non-conference schedule is horrible. Yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. So Cincinnati and Indiana, you have to look forward to that one just because, Cincinnati's on their playoff quest. Cincinnati reminds me a lot of the TCU team I played on. Defense first, focused on defense. However, I just think my TCU team is a little bit better. But they remind me a lot of the TCU team I played on. Very disciplined, defense first. And going on the road to play a team like Indiana, I think they're going to win. I don't see them losing. Let's see, any other interesting matchups on here? Florida State and Wake Forest is interesting. I know a lot of people were giving me a hard time because I had Florida State losing to Wake Forest in my model. They're like, oh, we played Notre Dame so close. But I still have them losing to Wake Forest, so that's interesting. Just to see, can Florida State right the ship? I don't think so. I think Wake Forest will beat them, but yeah, I don't know. Let's see. I'm looking at the slate. Yeah, there's a lot of crap on the schedule this week. Michigan State and Miami. I just don't think Miami's that good. Where do I have them at? I mean, I have them at 12, mainly because that Alabama game is really helping them out. And they beat a pretty good Appalachian State team, which, helps them. What was their game score for that game? Whoops. I mean, their game score, 0.71, 0.6. They, they're fine right now, but I don't know. But Miami and Michigan State is interesting. I don't think Michigan State's that good. Obviously, you see them in my model at pretty low. And I wonder if, like I said, that error is causing them to fall all the way down to 83. But I do have them going 3-8, so maybe it is right. But I wonder if because ODE is a big factor in how a team's rating is, and I wonder if if it's calculated as minus 2.5 or not. I don't think so, because R properly takes into consideration. But all these stats you see right here are the stats that feed the ratings. But you got it there. There's more red than green, and their greens. I mean, number 33. I think 83. Let's look at a comparative. Let's look at UT San Antonio above them. So UT San Antonio. I'm gonna do this. I'm going to do this. So let's calculate combined. I know this is tedious, but let's see if the combined rankings. But some of the stats get different weight. Like ODE gets more weight than. So UT San Antonio's average rank in the stats that influence the overall rating is 73.58. And then Michigan State's average rank in the stats that influence the rating. But then again, OD and DD get the biggest weight because that's ultimately what matters the most. It's 75, so I don't think it's a factor. Yeah, I was saying during the stream on Saturday, San Diego State and Arizona are both playing like I expected them to play in week 1. When you've worked with numbers as long as I have, it just becomes second nature. But yeah, Michigan State should probably not beat Miami. All right, so Nevada and Kansas State is interesting because Kansas State lost their quarterback, which is why they played so bad against Southern Illinois. And Nevada being better than I think people think. I think Nevada's even favored in that game, to be honest with you, based on the lines I've seen. You know, speaking of lines, let's look at some of the lines for this week. I don't have the app. I just want to see what the odds are, and I don't want to go to a tout website. I'll go to SBR. I like SBR. They're not a tout website. All right, so let's look at some of these odds. I'm going to use Pinnacle. Whoops. So, I mean, yeah, UCS favored against Louisville. I expected that. This is just gut reaction, so don't take any of what I'm about to say as like advice to bet with. I think Michigan should probably be favored by more. I think the Miami-Michigan State line is about right. I think a lot of people are going to be hammering whoever plays UConn this year. But Army, like we saw against Western Kentucky, you can't trust them. West Virginia is favored against Virginia Tech. That's very interesting, but not surprising. But I'm almost certain my model will be on Virginia Tech, guys. Coastal Carolina, 13.5-point favorite at Buffalo. Oklahoma's a 22-point favorite. I don't know what to make of that, to be honest with you. Cincinnati is a 3.5-point favorite at Indiana. I think it should be more than that, to be honest with you. I don't think Indiana's that good. They're getting too much respect. See, that Indiana's one of those teams that I'm talking about when I say it was very hard to accurately come up with preseason estimates, because Indiana is one of those what I call COVID year super teams that played a self-contained schedule, so you didn't really know how great they were. And so they're going to have inflated stats. Texas A&M, 28.5-point favorite. Their offense looks so bad without Haynes King. But New Mexico, against an overmatched, to be honest, New Mexico State team didn't really do much. So I would not touch that game. Colorado and Minnesota are playing. I didn't even know that was a non-conference matchup. But Colorado 2-point favorite. I don't know. I do not know about that. All right, yeah, Nevada was favored like I predicted. That was not a surprise. Notre Dame only a 7-point favorite over Purdue. I think Purdue could win that outright. I do. UMass is only a 17-point dog. I think Georgia Tech should be bigger dogs than 28.5. USC is an 8.5-point favorite at Washington State. Wow. Either they're going to come out guns a-blazing like they did when Ed Orgeron took over that when Lane Kiffin got fired, or Washington State is a value play there. It's going to be boom or bust for them. Either USC is going to blow Washington State out or they're going to lose. There's going to be like no close win. Alabama 15.5. So I thought it was going to be 14.5, but it's 15.5. Florida State's only a 5.5-point dog, but I think that's what my model had it as. Kent State, I wouldn't sleep on them. They're playing another good defense in Iowa, so they just got the bad luck of the draw when it came to non-conference opponents this year. Let's see. Seems like Northwestern and Duke always play every year in non-conference. Washington is a 17-point favorite over Arkansas State. That is interesting. I'm very curious as to what I have here. I have it at 22.3. Wow, okay. I thought it would be the opposite. San Diego State, 7-point dog at home against Utah. I would not be surprised if my model is all over San Diego State there. And Georgia, 30.5-point favorite over South Carolina. Sounds about right. Penn State, 6-point favorite over Auburn. I think Air Force should be favored by more than that. Virginia. I think Virginia is very underrated, and they're 9-point dogs at North Carolina. I want to see what I have it at 6.8, so I think Virginia is a value play. I wouldn't be surprised if my model is on that. Central Michigan, I think 19 is way too many points for them, but I might be wrong. 16.3, so yeah, I was right. Stanford and Vanderbilt, interesting matchup in terms of both teams rebounded in week 2, but Texas 26 over Rice. Tulane 14 at Ole Miss. That's interesting. Tulane's offense is pretty good, but I think their defense will have a hard time. And then Oklahoma State is a dog at Boise State. I think that's right. Oklahoma State has not been impressive. And here's Arizona State, BYU. BYU, the 3.5-point home dog. Awesome. All right, well, those are the odds this week, and I'm about to wrap it up here. But, interesting week. Stay tuned for my picks video on Wednesday. It's going to be fun. We got more picks coming in, and hopefully with my keys coming out this week, that I'll finally have a winning week this year in college football. I mean, I had a winning week 0. I mean, kind of. I mean, only 5 plays or so, but I went 3-2. All right, everybody enjoy Monday Night Football if that's what you're watching. Meanwhile, I'm going to go watch WWE Monday Night Raw. Everybody have a good rest of your night.